She drowned, according to a Home Office pathologist. He went into great detail about why she concluded that, but she was alive when she went into the water and she died through drowning.
She died through drowning. Well, how did she drown? What caused her to drown? How did she end up in the water? Did somebody push her into the water? There's been witnesses who have said that they've heard screams. There have been witnesses who have said that they've seen a suspicious man who was dressed in black. Surely the coroner has been questioning all of this. The police has never mentioned anything about these screams. The police have never mentioned anything about this man dressed in black. Now, why haven't they appealed to the public about this information?
The pathologist also said from her post-mortem examination she deduced that Nicola had no alcohol in her body when she went into the water.
She had no alcohol in her system when she went into the water. So why did the police make it sound like that Nicola Bulley was struggling with alcohol? Why did they slander her? Why did they destroy her reputation? None of it makes sense, does it?
There was no evidence that anybody else had been involved in her death. It was a little unusual, the beginning of this inquest, because the coroner began...
There was no evidence that someone was involved in her death. Well, for you to have evidence, you got to follow up leads. You got to find the evidence. Wasn't there a man dressed in black that was reported to the police? So why didn't the police make any appeals about this man? He was obviously suspicious, otherwise the man wouldn't have reported him. You see, this is the problem. They say that there was no evidence, but they didn't look for any evidence. They didn't care about any evidence. So how could they ever have any evidence?
It's a little unusual, the beginning of this inquest, because the coroner began by issuing a warning. He said that there had been commentary on social media that there was a threat of disruption to the inquest, and he said that anybody who was thinking of disrupting the proceedings would face very swift justice, a contempt of court charge, and would be dealt with very quickly. But he said because of his concerns, extra security had been put around this building.
Well, if only the coroner was that strict regarding Nicola Bulley's case. I mean, he seems to be very strict when it comes to members of public disrupting the inquest. But when it comes to looking for the truth, it doesn't seem like he's been bothered, does it? Why didn't the coroner question the police about why it took 23 days to find Nicola Bulley? If she fell in near the bench, like what they want us to believe, then how did she end up in the middle? How did she drown? Surely she would have just fallen onto the rocks, like Peter Folding told us.
Once the inquest was underway, we heard from after the pathologist, we heard from a second witness, a police diver. He talked over aerial photographs of the riverbank and the spot where there is a bench and a slope into the river, the spot where it's thought Nicola Bulley went into the water. The police diver said that the slope down to the bank was very steep, and then there was something like a metre drop into the water itself. And although it was quite shallow initially from the bank, there were rocks under the water. You could see the rocks quite clearly under that very shallow water. But then the police diver said that as you go out into the middle of the water, it falls, the bottom of the river is something like 4 metres deep. And he...
Again, for her to get to the middle of that river, she would have to have been pushed. She would have to have been launched into the middle of that river. Otherwise, she would have just landed on those rocks. Why hasn't the coroner questioned how shallow it is near that bench? Why has he not questioned how she got to the middle of that river? Why has the coroner not questioned anything?
Said if you slipped in at that point, there was nothing on the riverbank to stop you going in. He talked about the river flow on the day Nicola disappeared. It was a bit more than walking pace.
The river flow was a bit more than walking pace. Well, that's not exactly a very strong flow, is it?
He said, and it was flowing downstream around a bend towards a weir. Now, Nicola's body was found 23 days after she vanished, about a mile and a half downstream from that spot by the bench where it's thought she entered the water.
It took 23 days to find her when she was just a mile away from the bench. The police were searching up to the sea. Why is the coroner not questioning any of this? Why does he not find it strange that the police couldn't find her, even though she was just a mile away from the bench? Why is he not questioning the fact that they were using the best equipment in the world and they still couldn't find her? Are you sure she was there all that time?
As for the water itself on that day, said the police diver, it was very, very cold, about 4 degrees, almost freezing, he said. And if you fell in accidentally in those circumstances, the cold water shock would make you gasp.
I'm not quite sure how the cold water would make you gasp if you fall into water that's just a few inches deep and you've just fallen onto some rocks. That doesn't quite make any sense, does it?
So that's about as far as we've got with the witnesses. The inquest is expected to last for 2 days. There are 17 witnesses expected to give evidence today, and tomorrow 5 more, including Nicola Bulley's partner, Paul Ansell, and her sister, Louise Cunningham. And one of those 5 witnesses tomorrow is listed as a local GP. Yes, and I think as the 2-day inquest unfolded, it became pretty clear from listening to more than 24 witnesses that there was nothing to suggest a crime.
There was nothing to suggest a crime. Well, that doesn't make any sense, does it? Who was the man that was dressed in black, the suspicious man that a member of public reported to the police? Why didn't the police try to find out who this person was? Why hasn't that person come forward and ruled themselves out? What about the 2 suspicious fishermen that were reported to the police by members of the public? The witnesses that saw these 2 suspicious fishermen had to go to independent newspapers to tell their version of events and to make people aware of the situation, because they said that the police did not take them seriously. The 2 suspicious men or the 2 suspicious fishermen were trying to hide their faces, and yet you're saying that there's nothing to suggest that there was a crime. There were screams that were heard in the location. Again, you say that there's nothing to suggest that there was a crime. How do you know that? How do you not know that Nicola Bulley was pushed into that river?
Nothing to suggest that Nicola had shown any suicidal thoughts or self-harm thoughts. So I think inevitably it was going to end up as an accident in the eyes of the coroner. But of course, it's still a mystery to a degree, because even the coroner said in the last few minutes that he couldn't be sure why Nicola ended up in the water.
If he couldn't be sure how Nicola ended up in the water, then why did he conclude it as an accident? That doesn't make any sense, does it?
Her partner, Paul Ansell, this morning in his evidence had suggested a scenario in which...
In his evidence, he suggested a scenario. Well, a scenario is not exactly evidence, is it? And why is Nicola Bulley's partner suggesting such a scenario when he wasn't there, when he didn't witness anything at all?
Nicola, a woman we kept being told was used to juggling lots of things at the same time, was connected by her mobile phone to a conference call at work. She was walking the dog at the same time. In Paul Ansell's view, she had probably put the phone down on the bench, while still listening to that call as she went to put the harness back on her dog Willow. All of this at the top of a very steep slope that went down sharply towards the water and then a metre drop from the edge of the riverbank into the water.
Well, his views definitely changed, hasn't it? Because he was saying that he believes 100% that she's not in that river. And now he's giving a scenario where she put her phone down for a second to put the harness back on a steep hill and fell down into the river. I mean, he wasn't even there, so why is he suggesting such a thing? That doesn't make any sense, does it? I mean, why is Nicola Bulley's partner trying to push this narrative that she fell into the river? Why is he not questioning any of the suspicious circumstances regarding her falling into that river?
The coroner said, well, that's a possible scenario, but he couldn't be sure. He said something else might have occurred.
The coroner said something else might have occurred. Well, if something else might have occurred, again, why did he conclude it as an accident? That's not fair on Nicola Bulley. Surely we need the truth for Nicola Bulley. Nicola Bulley needs justice, and this is not justice at all.
That could have led to Nicola's fall into the water, but he'd ruled out everything else. That theory he couldn't be sure of. That theory from her partner. So
that theory he couldn't be sure of. That theory from her partner. Well, that's a bit obvious, isn't it? Because he wasn't there, and neither was Nicola Bulley's partner. Nicola Bulley's partner is speculating that she fell into the river whilst putting Willow's harness on, but yet he wasn't even there. And when they were looking for Nicola Bulley, he was saying that he doesn't even believe that she's in the river. Nothing seems to be adding up here at all.
It's an accident. Exactly why that accident occurred will, I guess, forever remain a mystery.
Even more of a mystery is why does the coroner seem to think that it's an accident, even though he's got no proof at all that it was an accident. Nicola Bulley could have been pushed into that river. Nicola Bulley could have been killed. And yet nobody seems to be bothered. Lancashire police do not seem to be bothered. The coroner has just ruled things out. It's a lot easier to say that Nicola Bulley just fell into that river rather than actually trying to look for the truth. I believe that Lancashire police have let down Nicola Bulley in every single way. Poor Nicola Bulley may never get justice. Rest in peace, Nicola Bulley.